I'm the Angry Spork. So far, we've seen a bunch of different crossovers this year, but today I begin reviewing what happens when one universe crosses over with its own alternate versions. When DC Comics was making the move from New York City to Los Angeles, they needed a buffer to keep sales going. That was Convergence, a storyline where alternate versions of cities were plucked from the DC multiverse, encapsulated in domes that took away superpowers, and left on an alien planet for a year. Also, a figure named Telos could pit them against each other in combat to see who'd win, and destroying the loser universes. It was kinda like DC versus Marvel, except less epic and more of a case of DC having to be told, stop hitting yourself, because they were essentially hitting themselves. I didn't bother with the Convergence miniseries proper. By this time, it was 2015, and on top of having learned my lesson about big tie-in comic events from Our Worlds at War, I was more than a little sick of the bad ideas being passed around at DC. Felt a lot like they were teasing readers they'd previously told to kiss off with their reboot in the first place. Additionally, it was more or less established that the New 52 universe was the pre-Flashpoint universe, just altered, if in new and excitingly idiotic ways. But as the two-parters revealed, those pre-52 versions were still around. And Rebirth goes back on that by saying it's the same universe but altered by Dr. Manhattan because they need to milk the Watchmen franchise for all it's worth, including trying to cover for their terrible, terrible ideas. Long history doesn't deter new readers, executive and editorial incompetence does. I did, however, indulge in 5 of the many two-part stories that served as tie-ins. Some out of curiosity, some because of the writers, and one that was kind of by accident. So I begin taking issue with 5 of these stories, today focusing on Convergence, the new Teen Titans, written by Marv Wolfman, featuring art by Nicola Scott, Mark Deering, and Jeremy Cox. So let's start this strange inter-reality journey and see if these comics make us want to turn the page or turn our heads. Number 1's cover shows us a classic Titans roster from the era by Wolfman himself. While Nightwing, Donna Troy, and Starfire all smile at the reader, Cyborg and Beast Boy smile in different directions, while Jericho is led by Cole, who is imitating Iceman with that shiny platform. Yeah, Wolfman's run was long before I got into comics, so you'll have to forgive my uncertainty. The celebratory nature of the cover isn't felt on the first splash page, showing Donna maintaining a recording of the past year to prevent current events from happening again. In a base in their version of Gotham, she somberly holds a picture of herself and her husband Terry. She notes how the chaos from the first few months under the dome has quieted down, thanks in part to Nightwing's city-spanning surveillance system. Say that 3 times fast while holding your nose and chewing bubble gum. Well, gotta freshen the cliches up every now and again. However, it gets kinda lonely when crime is down and you only see your friends when there's a big enough threat. That and everyone else has found some manner of companionship. She closes the journal with the hope that the rest of the Earth is fine and prays her husband is safe. Nightwing calls to say that there's been a botched robbery, leaving 5 dead, and he and Starfire, jet-packing in pursuit, need ambulances on the scene and guidance in their chase. The Tamarinian princess goes into rage mode, and despite her partner's protest, figures why not use lethal force with her pack's weapons when her targets had just done the same. Oh, real mature, Star. If everyone was shooting their enemies with energy blasts, would you do it too? Wait, she actually does that. In the central city of the Tangent Universe, some DC gimmick from years back I never paid attention to, Star Sapphire is unable to blast open the dome because, well, no powers, and even encouragement from Firehawk won't change that. Another member of their group, we'll find out later in the comic probably, reminds them they'd traveled into the past so as to save their future, and being held hostage kinda prevents that. That's when the dome recedes and a voice tells them that their worlds are dead, and only one city will be granted a future in trial by combat. Zip! I'm gonna go with future version of an expletive. So, what? It'd be like me saying, "You filthy piece of nothing," or "You son of a fast."
As images of the Titans are shown to the people I don't recognize, so too are their faces revealed to our titular heroes. Because how embarrassing would it be if Nightwing and crew went and defeated a different city's champions, right? Wing orders a rendezvous as they finally get to see that beyond their protectorate is an unfamiliar wasteland. Starfire realizes that her powers have returned and starts blasting the thieves. When Grayson objects, she reminds him of her time as a slave, and in the 4 years they've known each other and 6 months they've been married, he still doesn't seem to accept her for her alien heritage. As she flies off, hoping it wasn't a mistake leaving the killers alive, Beast Boy reports that Cyborg, busy helping upgrade the city's power grid, isn't doing so well. Vic's positive attitude notwithstanding, the molybdenum cells holding his power core is deteriorating, and a replacement has yet to be found.
And I sure hope he doesn't notice my very audible voice as I'm telling you this, especially since I'm only a few feet behind him, I'm not whispering, and he probably has enhanced hearing because Cyborg.
At the base, Cole walks into the room upset about Joey, aka Jericho, aka Son of Deathstroke. She's certain that he finds her as attractive as she finds him, but her attempts at getting closer make him pull away. As if perhaps reflecting on her own romantic troubles, Donna tells Cole to be herself, and he'll find a way to signal his interest. Otherwise, there's nothing she can really do about it. Cole thanks her for helping everyone like she always does, and, well, we don't see the young woman leave the room, but I imagine she must have. Donna sheds a tear over not being able to help herself. We get 2 panels of Beast Boy helping with some grunt work, while Cy confirms he indeed heard his green buddy tell others he was all but done for. Then we cut to Tangent Star Sapphire, locating what must be their opponent's city in the distance.
Zip that war!
However, Purple Skin Bullcut has an idea.
Look, I'm not familiar with these characters. They haven't been identified yet, so I have to work with what I've got.
Since they were clearly transported to this world, someone with that kind of power would have the means of transporting them back. Unfortunately, the energy necessary for that seems to be in the very city whose heroes they're ordered to fight. It's a choice between millions of lives in the here and now and billions in their future. Sure enough, they assault the plant Vic and Gar are working in, declaring themselves the Doom Patrol, which is something of a surprise to Beast Boy, having known his own version of the team, and this ain't them. It's not long after calling for help, not very long at all, before Starfire shows up to defend her friends. She's struck from her 6 o'clock by Sapphire, but don't worry, Cole stops her fall by generating a platform of solid crystal.
Because the Titan that generates platforms of rusty nails was just on the outskirts of town getting sub sandwiches when they were abducted.
The battle of the 2 teams is earnest but brief. After Cyborg's attack is bounced back at him, the guy in green, called Rampage, calls the woman with the futuristic potty mouth, Doomsday, that they need to fall back. Star wants to go after them, but Nightwing doesn't want her killing anyone. Both he and Donna don't feel they had any murderous intent, but the mystery of their attackers will have to wait, as Victor is clinging to life. Meanwhile, the Tangent Doom Patrol surmises their opponents were from an alternate Earth, and while the power plant was destroyed, they can fuel their way home by taking the regenerating Promethean power cells from Cyborg.
The plant was destroyed? I didn't get any of that in their short scuffle. I mean, there was one explosion Nightwing flipped away from, but no details of damage to the facility. Maybe they should have tried working that into one of the panels.
At Star Labs, many of the Titans are in a hallway by a set of stairs. Nightwing is sending them as he basically brushes Starfire off to talk later, his expression not the most enthused. While Cole tells the orange space Amazon how she can relate, Grayson bumps into Donna, wanting to strategize against the new foes and who's ever behind this forced war. Troy tries to lean the conversation to more interpersonal matters with a "frou," which I think was some kind of whistle, but Nightwing would rather not. However, she doesn't let him off that easy, reminding him that Coriander's people live by their emotions, so what they feel is intense and genuine, be it hate for her enemies or love for Grayson.
A Starfire with emotions and, dare I venture, a personality? What a novel concept!
Richard expresses doubt that he and Corey ever would have gotten married had it not been for being abducted, but Donna tells him he's fortunate that he has someone to love, whereas she's been disconnected from her husband for so long. He apologizes, and then we jump to an odd panel. It's the male and female Titans on either side, like awkward kids at a school function, each too afraid to ask the other to dance. What's more, the color schemes are largely black, like they're getting ready for a funeral. So, funeral-themed school dance? Anyway, as her Doom Patrol prepares for battle, if a tad reluctantly, Firehawk sneaks away, contacting Nightwing for a chat.
Yeah, Grayson's in for it now. He forgot to cancel his membership to multiversematch.com.
We then get a 2-page spread of a short history on the Titans, specifically the members in this book. On to issue 2, the cover of which features an obvious shout-out to Crisis on Infinite Earths, with Beast Boy impossibly cradling Cyborg, as the other Titans brace for the Tangent Doom Patrol's arrival.
Maybe Gar isn't in mourning of a lost friend, but screaming, "Help me! This is like a koala trying to lift an elephant!"
The first page is split between Nightwing and Firehawk, communicating with each other as they travel across their respective cities. Yet no explanation on how she got his email address in the first place. While trust is something of an issue, they're both concerned about the mysterious entity that wants them to fight each other, lest both their worlds be destroyed. So they'll try and find an alternate option together. Meeting face to face, Earth 1 hero to just Earth but from the future heroine, they're determined to let no one die, be it the 8 billion in the tangent future or the 8 million currently in Gotham.
What a novel and, frankly, odd coincidence that both numbers began with 8.
Hawk reveals her team's plans for Cyborg's power cells, led by her mother Deirdre, aka Doomsday, and it just so happens that attack is happening as they speak, the Doom Patrol crashing into Cyborg's room as he's accompanied by the Titans.
Not that I'm rooting for these people to abduct Cyborg, but, wouldn't it have made a bit more sense to wait until visiting hours were over?
Eventually, most of the Titans are incapacitated, apparently Jericho being knocked out when Gorilla Beast Boy falls on him. Nightwing gets a call of the attack, and he assumes Firehawk was a distraction, which she denies. Meanwhile, Starfire gets extra ticked off as they try hauling Victor away, knocking the patrollers aside with increased intensity. Cole is elated when Jericho awakens, kissing him, but he signals that she's talking too much? Maybe they'll discuss things when there isn't a battle going on? Mute characters can be a bit difficult to read. Corey's brief hesitation gives Doomsday the chance to take her out with a laser blast, and her team makes their escape as Nightwing arrives on Firehawk's vehicle. Recovering on the roof, he tries making a plan while Star is angry she was kept from killing their enemies. Otherwise, Cyborg could have been saved, meaning Nightwing's rules are invalid. As Donna takes her skyward for a more private chat, Gar reminds the team leader of his own personal losses, and that Cyborg is the only family the Green Guys got left. But Wing assures him Vic isn't lost yet. We briefly stop with the Tangent Patrol of Doom to Firehawk angered she was left out of the loop, with Doomsday snapping back that their mission won't be entrusted to children, and their Earth is their only priority. Then we cut to Cole enhancing Joey Wilson's painting with her powers, making a sign like he's awkwardly rubbing his chin. I don't know if this is official sign language or maybe something Joey made up, and the young woman seems to understand, saying as hard as his life has been, he doesn't need to hide who he is from the team or her.
And suddenly the pacing takes a quick turn down what the Zip Boulevard.
As Donna and Wing have a chat and Gar monitors for Cyborg, the Doom Patrol has Vic hooked up to their ship. Rampage apparently creating improved cells for the Promethium which won't deteriorate. However, the more pain the process inflicts on Victor, even at his furious encouragement, The more bowl cut begins to question what they're doing. Deirdre is fed up and takes over, not knowing the transfer allows the Titan's scanners to pick up on Psy's signal. As the star-crossed newlyweds try to talk through their problems, BB informs them they've located Vic, though it seems due to damage to his power cells. And with a classic battle cry, the Titans go, and are soon battling the alternate Doom Patrol again. And it seems they were already waiting on the roof. Convenient. Beast Boy sneaks in and frees his buddy, but old Mr. Stone still has some stuff that needs a-doing. At the fight, Doomsday fires a laser blast slow enough for Nightwing to intercept, taking the injury for his wife.
You wanted to kill him!
No, I wanted to kill you. He got in the way. Which is kind of weird since you got super strength and would probably have taken the blast a lot better than he did.
Deirdre insists that she'll kill anyone to see her mission through, her own death being the only thing to stop her. And that's not something the alien is willing to do as far as she's concerned. However, Starfire assures her both of her capability and desire to terminate the woman, but chooses otherwise, only giving her a solid punch since she doesn't want to become like the stranger. Corey and Grayson share a make-out, since it's not like they're in a life-and-death battle or anything, when Cyborg intervenes with an ultimatum. They work together against their unseen abductor, since the Tangent-verse people don't seem like they're actually evil, or they continue fighting and their gear goes kaboom in about a minute. Fortunately, Deirdre picks option number 1. Whew! I really did not want to die. Thank you. Thank you.
Is it too late to get Donald Glover to play a live-action Cyborg? He's got the chops for both dramatic and comedic acting, so why not?
However, the peacemaking is interrupted by a sudden tremor, after which the Doom Patrol is gone, and it seems by appearances they're back on Earth, save for a single star in the sky and Donna's ominous feeling of something wrong. Certainly don't want to elaborate with an establishing shot or anything, do we? The comic ends with lots of smiles and Nightwing's assurance that whatever's wrong, they'll figure it out, and at least they're with the ones they love, as he holds Starfire's hand.
And that was Convergence, the new Teen Titans. This was the accidental purchase I mentioned earlier. I'd asked for a different Titans Convergence title. I'll get to that in a couple of weeks. And I guess there was some confusion because the shop owner pulled this.
I decided to give it a shot anyway because, for one thing, it helps support my local comic shop, and I'd heard a lot of good things about Wolfman's Titans run, which heavily inspired one of my favorite cartoons. While some writers that work in the business for decades tend to get stuck in a particular style or feel dated when they're trying to write something contemporary, this still felt very fresh and the Titans real and engaging. The art does a good job of showing their emotions for quiet panels, and Cyborg and Beastie have fun dialogue with each other, though that's largely an issue too.
Though it's the second issue where pacing becomes a bit frantic. While that could be on the writer and or artists, the larger factor may have been the fact that this was for an event DC was rushing out for their big move.
Which is likely also the reason for the Doom Patrol's sudden disappearance and wherever the Titans ended up not being appropriately established. Time crunches, editorial rules to conform to the main series, stuff like that. Though that wouldn't quite explain everything, like why we didn't actually see the supposedly damaged power plant, which I guess means Gotham is without electricity. What also didn't help was the lack of detail, like in captions, for certain characters. The Titans are fine, they refer to each other by their real and heroic names often enough, on top of them being more familiar to a wider audience in animated form. But the Tangent universe is much more obscure, and we don't get names for some of them until after the halfway point of the first issue.
I'm not familiar enough to compare this with Wolfman's other works, but it's an enjoyable read that doesn't really require you to be reading the main event. Next week, we look at the S-emblazoned jacket and the egocentric clone who wears it. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Back when Superman died fighting Doomsday, 4 figures emerged to fill the void he had left. One of whom was an egocentric, flirtatious, and kinda self-centered teenage clone of the Man of Steel, who would later have to accept being called Superboy. And as it turns out, there's an alternate Earth where he never left behind his leather jacket phase. So, I'm taking issue with Convergence Superboy, written by Fabian Nicieza, with art by Carl Moline and Jose Marzan Jr. Let's see if this two-parter will make us want to turn the page, or turn our heads.
Issue 1's cover has a kind of old-school charm, with a painted art style featuring a dotted background, while Superboy himself is heavily outlined in white. We see him from the back as he turns towards the reader and thumbing to his jacket, indicating that we should not mess with the S, though it looks like he updated his look with chalk, or maybe a white Sharpie. We begin with him in a lab, wearing an unusual suit, though in his usual color scheme, undergoing what looks like an unpleasant procedure.
I don't think this is a standard eye exam!
Observed by Dr. Serling Roquette and the mutate XX, Con-El is in month 10 of Cadmus' experiments to infuse solar radiation and restore his powers. But like trying to break their dome prison, no such luck. XX thinks that whoever abducted them wants to observe them for some scientific study. But Khan worries that Metropolis will eventually need a hero, and with Superman absent, it'll depend on Superboy. He storms off, but Roquette notes that the latest scan supports their theory. Khan is absorbing the radiation, but for some reason can't access his abilities. Perhaps due to a mental block or genetic firewall. That may be due to the same forces that trapped them in the dome, which creates weather patterns and simulates night and day cycles. And while the likes of Darkseid or Brainiac could accomplish this level of technology, they'd have been gloating about it by now.
And if there's anyone that understands gloating about their accomplishments, it's this version of Superboy. Oh, that's not me talking. The comic actually says that.
What really seems to sting, though, is that the teenage clone was just beginning to understand his abilities, and the city was beginning to accept him despite his arrogance before they were abducted. Metropolis has since adjusted to their new normal, but Khan has felt without purpose since losing his immense power. An insult from a street vendor and an old couple reminiscing about being saved from Parasite by Superman while visiting his memorial statue all feel like salt on the wound. And from the dialogue, if Khan is being truthful and never meeting Supes, this reality's Metropolis must have lost Big Blue only a short time before being abducted. That's when Telos's big Convergence speech is heard, the dome falls, and to his sheer delight, Superboy is back in town.
Has he been wearing that under his clothes the whole year? I hope he at least washed it from time to time, otherwise people are going to be identifying him by the superhero that stinks to high heaven.
As Khan jets across the sky, and his insecurities mount, he's observed by a figure in shadow, as he is ordered by another to guide him to Hell's Gate.
Don't let the name fool you. It's just a kindly bakery that makes delicious crepes and desserts. Though the only payment they accept is your soul.
Khan sees a familiar blur make its way through the city, wondering if Wally West has been in town this whole time, and why he'd put a bowl on his head. Followed by a Cadmus drone, he's led to Hell's Gate Island, which was severed in the doming process and is largely uninhabitable. Though that makes me wonder how long that fire's been going. At first losing his target, he spots someone in a building, only to fall into a trap of kryptonite gas, one set by Red Robin. He smacks Khan around before telling him to yield, but instead the teenager uses a burst of his unique tactile telekinesis to set his foe up for a super punch, which doesn't land when the Flash catches Double R. Double X's scans, both technological and his returning telepathic powers, say his charge is facing an older Dick Grayson and one certainly bona fide Flash, but of an alternate Earth, specifically from the story Kingdom Come, and with their age comes a distrust of younger superheroes.
These whippersnappers and their leather jackets and rock music and unkempt metahuman powers that let them level city blocks and stay off my lawn!
After a gust of super breath, Khan causes a domino effect on 10 buildings to catch the speedster off guard, and it works to incapacitate both his opponents. But as Khan's approach is cut off by heat beams, Double X senses another Kryptonian, one from a tumultuous world where he had to fight his own, and in Superboy he sees a realized peer, impatient youth with much power but little sense of responsibility. The newcomer tells Khan he can save 2 versions of Metropolis, but must surrender without a fight, difficult as that decision may be. "But it's one I would make without a second's hesitation. The question is, are you Superman, or just a child pretending to the mantle?"
Or are you written by Jeff Johns as a malicious middle finger to readers who have character preferences that don't fall in line with his own fanboy leanings?
After the story is a 2-page briefing on this Superboy, mostly covering his origins and some of his time in Hawaii. Issue number 2's cover is starkly different from the first, both in style and intensity. Kingdom Come Superman holding his young counterpart by the neck with one hand, like a war veteran grandpa that's truly had enough.
What did I say about my lawn?
Serling and Double X watch Red Robin and the Flash save civilians from various perils, caused by the Battle of the Generation Gap, as seen by Superman smacking Khan with a jumbo jet.
No offense to Superboy, but points to old Cal. That looks awesome.
Double X's narration notes how the older Superman wouldn't be acting as he is if the area weren't abandoned. Con-El, he's a little less sure about. Cal says that being pitted against each other is part of something larger, and they can root it out if they work together, after the teenager admits defeat. Superboy's answer is to blindside Super Gramps with his tactile TK, sandwiching him between, I'm gonna say, 2 parts of the same plane. As cool looking and clever as that is, it's not overly effective against the experienced Kryptonian, who states the smarter, more noble choice is to protect his city by choosing not to fight, as a hero would. Superboy only gets madder, able to get a few good hits in on his opponent as he questions the idea of giving up being the best option, and if he's even fighting a real Superman. Old Cal isn't about to validate himself when he has everyone's best interests at heart, and then he's launched miles away by a telekinetic burst. Unfortunately, it was in the heart of the city Khan was trying to protect.
Oh no, I really man-of-steeled it this time.
Flash hits him with a flurry of super-fast punches and is hit with a TK disruption of the water he's running on. Double X ponders if the kid realizes the kind of risk he's posing to the city as Khan arrives at the fortunately empty stadium, beaten there by Flash. Duh. Roquette runs a Cataclysm scenario which predicts Metropolis's destruction in under a half hour.
But on the bright side, if it takes longer than 30 minutes, the devastation is free.
However, the teen isn't just fighting over his ego, but the uncertainty about their unknown captor, while overlooking the fact that pondering these questions further endangers innocent lives, which Wally continues to save. As an unrelated tremor shakes the ground, Double X senses the uncertainty in the minds of these alternate heroes, how their actions could mean doom for both Metropolises. Metropoli. You know what I mean. But Serling doubts they can know for sure what the right decision is. Back at the Super Brawl, old Cal again tells Khan to stop, but he goes on fighting as that's what Superman would do. Caught on camera by Jimmy Olsen accompanying Lois Lane, a building drops on them, but their fight continues, to the point Superman shoves him to the ground, demanding to talk things over. He sees Lois and the two catch each other off guard, each feeling a sad awareness of having lost their own versions of each other, but at peace that they live on in some alternate form. But ever the reporter, Lois begins asking questions. Old Cal explains how an unknown enemy is manipulating them, but they're seeking a peaceful conclusion. The exchange is just what you'd expect of either version of the two if they hadn't lost each other. So Khan, the mood killer, lobs a chunk of street at him.
This is how you resolve things peacefully!
The asphalt breaks on Cal, and a sizable piece strikes Lois square on the forehead.
Finally, a good reason to punch a teenager in the face!
As Flash takes her to get medical care, Superman tells the child everyone will be hurt by their fighting. But Khan retorts that they're as clueless as he is, but Red Robin informs them they've got a better shot at finding the mastermind. Coaxed by Double X and assured he won't be killed, and boosting his ego a little bit, he agrees. One planet-moving punch later, nicely done by the way, and Khan is out cold. Both supers a little fearful and confused, but holding out hope this was the right move. Yeah, keep snapping pictures, Olsen. I'm sure he'd like a few framed ones to remember this moment. As Grayson uses his cape as a makeshift pillow, he wonders if he could have displayed that kind of courage in his youth. But for Kal-El, I would have expected nothing less from a hero who deserves to be called Superman.
And that was Convergence Superboy. I enjoyed it overall. Nice art, very clever uses of Superboy's tactile telekinesis, though it leaves some questions.
It seemed fairly hypocritical of Cal to talk about peaceful resolutions after his team guided Superboy to a deserted area with the express purpose of launching an initial attack. Don't get me wrong, Superboy was indeed overly aggressive in the fight, his lack of foresight causing mistakes, but this started with him being hit with a debilitating gas made from something lethal to him, then physically struck by a seasoned combatant. Who wouldn't fight back in that kind of situation?
I get that this is a lesson Superboy needs to learn, that no matter how much you want to prove yourself, there are times you have to leave matters to those who are more capable. It's a lesson DC Comics could stand to learn, but the Kingdom Come trio's actions make that message rather muddled and confusing.
The message they're trying to convey gets confused when you attack someone and then expect them to give up because you ask them. It risks becoming one of apathy, where a good, capable man may let evil flourish. A reader familiar with Kingdom Come would know what kind of Superman Kal is, but Khan doesn't. Kal's intentions would have been made clearer if they lured him to the abandoned island and tried talking things out first, expecting him to throw the first punch because he's young and arrogant. It would have worked better to showcase Khan desperate to prove himself if he just called them liars from the outset and acted like these old fogies expected. And since Double X is a telepath that was sensing the other hero's sincerity, he could communicate that to Superboy, helping him realize he's seriously dropped the ball. This is supposed to be a Superboy from just after Superman died, and at that time, even though he was a teenager and no one really took him seriously at first, he was very arrogant and didn't like being called Superboy. He expected to be called Superman, but that particular quirk was not quite delved into here.
You just can't genetically engineer good help these days. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. A couple of weeks ago, I looked at Convergence, the new Teen Titans, and mentioned that I hadn't really intended to buy it. Today, I'm taking issue with the title I did plan on buying the whole time, Convergence, the Titans. The mix-up is kind of understandable when you think about it. Scripted by Fabian Nicieza, with art from Ron Wagner, Jose Marzan Jr., and Chris Sotomayor, let's check out another version of the Titans and see if this story makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads.
The first cover features all the characters facing the reader with happy expressions. The older versions of Donna Troy and Starfire than we saw in the previous Titans story, and Arsenal/Red Arrow/Roy Harper holding his daughter Leanne. More on that craziness in a bit. A splash page has Roy narrating on his time as Speedy amongst the original Teen Titans. Robin, Wonder Girl, Kid Flash, and Aqualad, each a sidekick to better-known heroes. From there, it goes into a succinct overview of his life as he grew up, including his heroin addiction, recovery, hero name change to Arsenal, becoming a single father, and losing an arm, then his daughter.
Both of those losses happened in the same story, James Robinson's cry for justice. Frankly, I think killing off a small child was really going overboard and felt needlessly cruel. Also note, the title of this issue is Try for Justice, in a not-so-subtle hint, I'm sure.
I also noticed that Roy's memory seems to show him seeing Leanne being crushed by debris, though in Robinson's original story she died off panel, and was discovered by Green Arrow, and her death was relayed to him through communication. Though that happened in the same pre-Flashpoint continuity as a bunch of other tie-ins here, so perhaps this is an alternate reality that's just strikingly similar, but a little different. While not blaming himself for Leanne's death, Roy knows he can let it ruin or improve his life. He chose the former up until the dome covered Gotham, causing panic for the first few weeks, but things improved, despite metas losing their powers. And so did anyone with cybernetic limbs?
What? In the other Titans comic I reviewed, Cyborg was getting along fine. I mean, the casing for his power supply was faltering, but he could still, move. So I don't know what's up. Either Niciza was misinformed about the finer details of Convergence I's gimmick, or Marv Wolfman was.
Eventually, Roy did better too. No anxiety from brawling metas and a city needing to share led to less crime, and he set up a shelter he named Leanne's Place. As he impresses some kids with his simple prosthetic arm, the dome fades and we get Telos' message, though with a few differences from previous tie-ins. He calls Donna Troy at her photo studio while she's in a shoot with Starfire, and the women see they're no longer on Earth, and their powers have returned. Troy in particular feels whole again, though having initially seen her power loss as a blessing. They'll find out the hows and whys of this sudden development after a few more seconds of joyous flight.
I've been able to fly. Only my dreams. Why must I wake up in a world full of liars, cheats, and destroyers of my favorite characters? Oh.
Ow! Well, Roy's going to do a sweep of the city and suggests they suit up in case of trouble, and he and Donna have a playful back and forth about her previous outfits, which I imagine they can do since they've been friends for so long. He enters a secret lair he's set up with some of the Wayne Foundation grant money for displaced families, the money that didn't go into the shelter, of course. He activates All Eyes, which gives him access to cameras across the city, and no sooner does he sit down than a security alert sounds from Port Adams. With the likes of the Justice League MIA, it's up to any hero in the city to face whatever he sends Donna and Corey after. They tell him of the voice they heard while putting on their battle togs, about the impending battle and the one city surviving, though that seems a bit confusing, given that at least part of that was seen announced before Roy even called them, and they were in civilian clothes.
Unless part of Talos' experiment is to mix up his speech a little for each pair of battling realities, I think the editors missed a little detail there.
Coriander, however, is glad to be able to fly and fight again, so all's good with her as they arrive at the chaotic port to find a group called the Extremists, consisting of Gorgon, Lord Havoc, Die Hard, Dreamslayer, and Tracer. They conquered an alternate Earth and have even fought the Justice League, meaning they're far from pushovers. Knowing his friends will need help, Roy attaches his now functional arm and reminds himself what he does to bring meaning to losing Luann. Losing sight of that risks changing who he is and why he fights. He arrives in time to free the women from the grip of a would-be Dr. Octopus, and the two uneven sides ready to square off again. However, Dreamslayer figures it'd be better if Arsenal kills his fellow Titans instead, as the Archer raises a twin-barreled cannon from his forearm. In exchange, he would see the return of his daughter, now encased in an energy bubble by the villain, explaining his power to take her away from the moment of her untimely death, assuring this is no illusion. He can either kill his friends and have his child, or they'll all die anyway. Roy struggles, seeing his scared little girl trapped. Each barrel of his weapon suddenly turns to his friends, and on the final page, they simultaneously fire point blank.
What Roy forgot was that in the time of moderate peace, he loaded his arm weapons with paintballs.
Maintaining the tradition, the issue has 2 pages of history on the character, including garish details of Cry for Justice, as well as his subsequent return to addiction. Stay classy, DC. Issue number 2's cover, however, would appear to spoil that Troy and Star are just fine, the latter apparently doing a Doctor Strange impersonation, while they join Arsenal in attacking Dreamslayer. His cyber arm modified to a different weapon, and while shaking his fist indignantly. And instead of just being an ambiguous glowing head, the villain looks like he has a bird head that's on fire. The immediate aftermath of the previous cliffhanger would make it appear that he somehow missed. The choice was, my daughter could live again if I killed my best friends. As if.
Like, for sure, dudes and dudettes. Radical.
He actually fired at 2 support beams that precisely fall down into an arch, not to topple the cranes on the enemy, but give himself something to swing from as he grabbed Leanne, suddenly not in her little bubble for some reason. And having timed things right, Cyborg and Beast Boy have arrived, having been called before Roy left to help Donna and Starfire. He mentions Vic was paralyzed while the dome was up, which fits for this two-parter, but not the new Teen Titans tie-in. And apparently Beast Boy was stuck in pigeon form this whole time, so both of them have some pent-up aggression to unleash.
I would have figured that the loss of his shapeshifting powers would have simply reverted him to base human, maybe even without the green coloring. But as I just mentioned, the consistency of how the dome restricts superheroes is kind of in question.
Roy confirms this is indeed his daughter, since she doesn't like being called Pumpkin, and though he doesn't like leaving his friends behind, he prioritizes getting his kid to safety. Taking her to the shelter, he says he'll tell her why her name is on the plaque later, and says to everyone else they need to evacuate to the west while he secures Leanne in his bunker.
Okay, good. Hey, can any of us non-powered people stay in the nice, safe bunker too? Oh, no, okay, that's fine. We'll just run in a maddening crowd. That's cool. Try not to trample each other.
From Leanne's perspective, her father dropped her off at daycare earlier that morning and was abducted by Firehead a short time later. But for Roy, it's just a blessing to see his child alive again, though he's conflicted between staying with her and helping the Titans. Naturally, Doomslayer pops in, maybe he should change his name to Moment Slayer, and claims that in this fight initiated by some unknown entity, Leanne is the weapon of victory. When the girl disappears, Arsenal fires at the villain, demanding her return. But Dreamslayer, portaling the shots with his cloak, I guess, says he doesn't simply want to win the battle, but Arsenal's soul.
Dagnabbit, you see, Joe Quesada? This is the kind of nonsense you influence even outside your own publisher.
The Titans, meanwhile, focus all their attacks on Lord Havoc, but the guy has destroyed planets and just knocks them away. Beastie suggests calling in the other Gotham heroes, but his lordship says they're busy battling elsewhere for their city. Not sure how he knows that or why he'd care, though. Unless this is a case like in Superboy, where they're trying to root out their captor instead of playing his game, but it's not specified. Havoc's blast destroys part of the century-old Sprang Bridge, watched by Arsenal and Doomslayer from the bunker, the latter of whom says that aiding in his friend's defeat is the right choice, on top of retrieving his daughter from Limbo. But Roy wonders what the point of the bargain is if the extremists are going to win anyway. Somehow knowing the secrets of Harper's lair, he coaxes the archer to press a button concealed in the armrest of his chair, near a photo of Leanne. He presses it, though with some hesitation, and it activates cannons he'd installed all over the city, and only by unleashing his rage, Dreamslayer claims, can he purge his sins. A cannon hits Starfire, and Leanne is returned only briefly at first, but as the other Titans are targeted, Roy demands she be brought back to him before finishing the job. And that's exactly what Slayer does.
Even though he just said he'd only do it after he defeated his friends. But okay, changed his mind for no reason, I guess.
Hibachi Face is delighted enough at the betrayal of one's soul, and as Leanne runs to her father's arms, Roy initiates secondary target locks, and the weapons prove more effective on the extremists than the Titans did. Somehow. Then he hits Dime Store Dormammu with an EMP, which fries the bunker, the electronic arm he's wearing, and also scrambles the villain's teleportation, sending him back with his team, which he's quick to teleport elsewhere to face the Titans without the city's defenses to aid them. The heroes regroup on a rooftop, meeting the reunited father and daughter, apparently no apology necessary from Roy for shooting Starfire in the back, like a big, fat, cyber-armed rat. the peace doesn't last long, as an explosion erupts from Robinson Park, which has no weapons systems.
Why not? How else are you going to keep those pesky kids from cheating at kickball?
The Titans intend to face them again, win or die trying, but Arsenal is staying with his child. Forever or 5 minutes, it's miraculous enough she's back at all, Donna says. The comic ends with Roy holding Leanne as the Titans take off to face impossible odds, and he's thankful for everything they gave him over the years. Their family, friendship, the want to be a better man, and now this time with his daughter.
So that was Convergence, the Titans. I picked this up because I got to liking Fabian Nicieza's run on Red Robin before the big Flashpoint mistake of 2011. But I couldn't get into the New 52 title Legion Lost, which he wrote, because I found myself not really caring about the characters. Here, he's writing a character I'm only mildly more familiar with, and I'm enjoying myself a bit more. But that doesn't make it a perfect story.
Even if you ignore the inconsistencies regarding cybernetics with the new Teen Titans tie-in, there's another oddity. What makes Roy's arm, or 80% of Cyborg's body, different from any other electronic device used frequently in this story, or any other that they'd be rendered inert by the dome? If Cy was paralyzed, does that mean his power cells weren't working? Was he on conveniently operational life support machines? And a smaller detail was how Roy's arm cannons were pointed straight at Donna and Starfire, but all of a sudden looked like they were arched upwards to take out those beams. That's just wonky.
Aim? No! Just like I planned. Ow.
And then we have Dream Slayer, who is as much a stranger to me as the rest of the extremists, and for all his power, which seems almost convenient, but maybe it's part of his standard set, he suddenly becomes a moron. He orders Roy to defeat his friends, or he won't see his daughter ever again. Then Roy says he won't defeat his friends before he gets his daughter back. And this villain who talks about betraying your true self and how to cleanse your sins, he acquiesces and gets close enough to the guy he's trying to trick that he can be disposed of. Heck of a time for a brain fart. Though for him, I think that might have caused a small explosion, so I guess he's just an idiot. Though the art overall is smooth, bright, and clean, denoting the overall uplifting nature of a usually crime-ridden city finding peace, and Roy getting a happy ending. Like I said, I don't know much about Arsenal or his family, but Leanne's death and cry for justice was completely unnecessary. An attempt to shock readers into getting interested in Harper as a character, and even in this one alternate reality, it's nice to see it undone.
And while I wouldn't call this Nicieza's best work, it probably isn't his worst. It's a good enough story that's told with a few hiccups and one pretty noticeable convenience. Though, take this for what you will, I'm not close enough to the characters involved to be too heavily offended by any mischaracterizations you might see. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. The heroes trapped under the domes weren't all clones, former sidekicks, and possible future iterations, but also the heavy hitters we're more familiar with. I'm taking issue with Convergence, Superman, written by Dan Jurgens, accompanied by Lee Weeks and Brad Anderson on art. Let's see if this story makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads.
Issue 1's cover features a tender moment of Superman and Lois kissing, probably while there's a bonfire behind them. Makes more sense than making out in the middle of a destroyed city. We open on night in Gotham City, as a figure dressed in black runs across rooftops.
That's Batman.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Except this guy's talking about he's sure he can do just as good as the Dark Knight, despite not having all those years of training or pointed ears on his mask. Someone over a radio reminds him that Bats was nasty and obsessive, none of which describes who it turns out to be Clark Kent, as he interrupts a drug deal, and Lois acting as his proverbial oracle, and that's when Telos's message plays across the city. As Jimmy Olsen snaps some pictures, having followed the goons, it turns out these guys couldn't get drugs into the city and decided to make their own, which ended up killing some people. One of the thugs uses a flamethrower on their mystery assailant, but all it does is burn off the top layer of clothes, showing Superman is back and powered up again. Doesn't quite explain why he was wearing his super suit underneath his clothes, though I guess the neat imagery is supposed to make us overlook that. But because these guys aren't very smart after seeing him survive fire unscathed, they test the Man of Steel's powerlessness by shooting him.
Don't worry, fellas. I'm sure the next clip has the one ordinary bullet that'll manage to kill Superman.
Big Blue heat visions the guns so their owners will drop them, but one guy manages to take Jimmy hostage. The photog isn't worried, though, nor should he be, as Soup speedily retrieves him and sets him on a random rooftop. We get a bit of dialogue explaining how he, Lois, Clark, and Perry presumably, were in Gotham for a news convention when the city got domed. But there's no time to talk now, as he flies back home to Lois. They embrace, and we see that she is pregnant. Now with the dome gone and the due date closing in, their baby can be born in Metropolis like they wanted.
Well, the good news is that'll just take flying across an alien landscape. Bad news, it may be an alternate Metropolis protected by a snotty teenage clone or a haggard old man. There might be other options, but they're probably overrun with wild monkeys or hyper-intelligent gerbils.
They sit and talk a while, reflecting on their time stuck in the dome and covering stories, despite having no means of publication, joking about how Lois is sort of like a sidekick. Soups figures he should head out to investigate the source of that mysterious voice, but that can wait, as he treasures a quiet moment alone with his wife.
Hey, what about those drug dealers that set you on fire? Pretty sure they're still on the loose.
Lois reveals she recorded Talos' message, more detailed than in the other tie-ins. Superman doesn't much care for the experiment to only leave one city alive, and, well, it's odd how Talos says only the greatest heroes will live, but he's involved clear villains like the extremists, so he must not be in the know on what a hero is. Soups leaves to look into the matter while Lois stays connected on their comm devices. And somehow she has a window image of an alternate Batman. It's possible that it's a recording of an image projected on the dome as it fell, like in previous stories, but she seems too surprised now for that to be the case. Unless this Gotham has its own working internet and someone posted it on a bat tube. Flying across Gotham, Soups uses his super eyes to spot the various alternate cities taken and implanted on an alien planet. And despite the threatening nature of the message, he'll seek out an alternative to fighting to the death. In another Gotham, one from the Flashpoint mistake, because that's what it deserves to be called, Batman, who's Thomas Wayne instead of Bruce, tells some of his allies to prepare for war, courtesy of Abin Sur's Green Lantern ring generating a monitor. The scrawny Kal-El isn't ready to rush into battle, but his gritty and edgy compatriots like Cyborg and Captain Thunder disagree. Flashpoint Bats detects a flyer incoming and tells them to assume the worst and take him out.
Yeah, we're so angry and bloodthirsty and cynical, and that's what makes us cool. Extreme!
At Star Labs, Jimmy has met with Professor Hamilton, who's determined they're on an alien planet. Why this was done to have people fight is unknown. Olsen wants to photograph some alien terrain, so the prof lets him use a transport he'd originally intended to pierce the dome. But hey, not much use for that anymore. Superman is headed towards the other Gotham, noting that it seems like it's in worse shape than the one he's lived in for the past year, when he's knocked out of the sky by something headed in the opposite direction, as fast as Wally West.
Out of my way, I've seen her, she's alive!
Her friend told me she died when a group of rabbit ferrets chased her into a volcano, but I knew she was wrong!
That's when Captain Thunder comes out of nowhere, though Soup seems to begin calling him Shazam, his post-New 52 name. But since this is pre-New 52, pre-Flashpoint Superman, he should be calling him Captain Marvel. But hey, legal stuff, I guess. Just as Thunder Thighs thinks his Bat buddy overestimated their opponent, Big Blue shows him what's what. He asks if Thunder will listen to reason as the counterpart of Supes' Earth would. Then Cyborg and Abin attack. Clark stresses that no one need die as he takes their attacks. Sewer using a 6-shooter construct for some reason. Not sure why he wouldn't go with a ray gun or something native to his own people. They consider listening to him, though not letting up on their attack, being assured Supes is there alone. And that's when Jimmy shows up, showing the ride he borrowed from Hamilton apparently possesses formidable armaments. The Flashpointers take this as a sign Supes can't be trusted, and resume their assault. Meanwhile, Skinny L is searching for Lois Lane, whose voice he'd heard previously, overjoyed since his world's Lois died and was the only one to ever show him any kindness. At the monitors, Flashpoint Bats wonders if this Gotham is the one of Barry Allen's world, where his son survived. I thought that world, that timeline, would replace ours.
Close, but not quite. What we got was infinitely stupider.
However his reality survived, he ponders if he could fight his own son, while Super Skin and Bones lets himself into the Kent apartment. As he approaches, Lois tries to convince him that she's not who he thinks she is, but he's intent on keeping her safe while the city dies. She calls out to Clark as he's busy getting thrashed by 3 so-called heroes.
I don't think the Flashpoint characters are so much overpowering Superman as it is they're overwhelming him with how Jeff Johns was trying too hard. Without a good editor.
This 2-page history lesson features Superman's life from the time of his marriage to Lois to the new Krypton arc, even mentioning that electrical phase so many readers would love to forget. Issue 2's cover sees Bat Thomas watching Superman comfort Lois as she seems to go into labor. We open to a splash page of the aforementioned Alter Bats demanding a status update while standing in front of a family portrait. After the exposition of what we already know, he's told, I assume by his computer, that his cohorts are fighting Superman, then repeats he expected not to exist after Barry Allen changed things back. Then asks who/whatever to compare the opponent Gotham to what it knows about Allen's Earth to see if they're the same. But nothing conclusive.
There are limits to the questions Siri can answer, dude.
At the brawl, Cy tells Abin to take out the flying car, and he does, after saying he wonders if Superman's talk of cooperation is worth considering. You know, the thing they talked about last issue then decided to disregard after Jimmy tried to help? Amazing how he can backflip like that without actually moving. With his pal in danger, Superman tosses his enemies aside to give Jimmy a safe landing. The faces may be familiar, but they're nothing like their Earth's heroes. Here freaking here. After again offering to work together, his opponents give him the super edgy, grim stare, not willing to risk it because of what a mysterious voice said. So they resume their attacks, and Supes shows how much better he is than Subject 1, aka Skinny Cal. As Thunder begins cutting loose, Lois's call for help is heard, and that's when Clark has officially had enough. Regardless of the uber-dark, tragic world they live in, Superman is going to safeguard the ones he loves.
Love? How dare you speak the word that is forbidden by Grand Dipstick Didio?
The Green Lantern is willing to talk after Supes is beaten, but Jimmy finally proves useful by hitting him with an energy cannon, and Supes is okay with that, telling Jim that Lois Lane needs help. Olsen guesses she may be about to deliver the baby, and her husband, Clark, will want to be present. I'll see if I can find him.
Huh. You know, on losing his powers and being trapped in the city for a year, I'd have figured that maybe Lois and Clark would have told Jimmy about Superman's secret lives. I can see not telling the public, but their closest friend and colleague? Maybe if it had been a couple more years under the dome, they would have.
Scrawny Cal has taken Lois to the cave for medical care, since not much is left a secret with someone from his powers, and deduced that Thomas Wayne was a doctor. Even if she's from a different world, he cares about Lois and her safety, and nothing will make her an enemy in his eyes. Bat Thomas reveals that he's figured out that she's with the Superman.
Where I'm from, you two were friends.
Friends? Now you speak the word forbidden by movie craftsman Snyder and Goya. I shall hear no more.
Soups arrives home to find Lois gone, but sees her abduction on the recording from her webcam. Abin Sur arrives, now realizing they share a common enemy. But before heading to the Flashpoint Batcave, Abin elucidates with his Ring's Tragic Origins app that their Cal, Subject 1, was confined his whole life and never allowed to truly develop his abilities, and the Lois that he loved died in his arms. Then he explains how Thomas Wayne lost his son to a bullet and wife to madness, as Martha eventually became the Joker. But taking Lois to a doctor confirms that it's time for the baby to arrive. However, she's hesitant to give birth in a freak show, and that's when Subject 1 is removed from the picture. Clark approaches his wife as it's revealed that she kept her headset, which means it could be tracked from her computer, though there are a number of ways Soups could have discovered her location otherwise, or the fact that since they're talking about an alternate Batman, he'd be under a Batcave which is ever situated under Wayne Manor, but whatever. Alterbats, apparently acquiescing to the whole situation, says it might be safer to stay in the cave, as Captain Thunder would not think to look there.
So if he saw Superman flying across the sky holding a pregnant woman, he wouldn't hesitate to attack? Because that wouldn't surprise me from one of DC's attempts to look hip and cool.
As a tremor is felt, as happened in previous tie-ins, it looks like the only option is to deliver the baby in the cave. But since Thomas hasn't doctored since his son's murder, this is a job for Superman. A collage of images show, I'm guessing, either time passing just under 2 hours, or it took Lois 5 minutes to deliver the baby, and it looks as though Dr. Bats even gave a little backseat guidance. So, wrapping his newborn son in his cape, he hands him to his mother while he talks to Thomas, telling him the Bruce of his universe is a good man. The former doctor says life is the most precious commodity, and insists Clark do whatever it takes to protect his newborn child. He really doesn't know who he's talking to if he thinks Superman of all people needs to be told that. Husband and wife gather with the new addition of their family, Jonathan Samuel Kent, expressing their love as the comic ends.
And that was Convergence Superman. And I'm not crying, you're crying!
I liked the story overall, but that isn't to say it's without its problems. It did seem like Superman kind of let those drug dealers go, and expected Jimmy to hold off Cyborg and Thunderboy. Unless those two were unconscious for the duration of the story, or Abin's sword dropped Olsen off somewhere safe, I don't think he's in a good place right now. And that's nothing to say of whatever happened to Subject 1 after Soups flew him off panel. Was he just knocked out or locked somewhere safe? I think it would have made a bit more sense and maybe had a better impact overall if the We're Just So Cool League regrouped in the cave, found Superman delivering his child, and were inspired by the moment to agree to find another solution other than fighting. There are other issues, some people might not feel the same way as me, like Clark calling out Lois's name out loud amongst gun-toting drug dealers, and the fact that Thomas Wayne, a Batman that kills, is talking about how precious human life is. I only read the collected Flashpoint in a hardcover, but I really don't get people's fascination with this version of Batman. Different tragic outcome or not.
And I still wonder where Batman is in all this. It's his city, after all. Honestly, I don't think having Superman's cast in Gotham impacted the story that much, since I'm pretty sure Metropolis would still have its own drug dealers under the dome. And if you're thinking that maybe it's because Lois wanted her kid born in Metropolis, but she was stuck in Gotham, I don't think they played that up much to really affect things, and you could still get the same effect if they were in Metropolis, but Subject 1 took her to Flashpoint Batman's cave where she had to give birth.
I like the art overall, thoroughly enjoyed Superman schooling the Flashpointers, and enjoyed that human moment of Superman helping Lois deliver their baby, as it was a wonderful exception to the general mediocrity or just downright terribleness I've come to expect from latter-day DC. No wonder this version of the Kents not only made the jump to the horribly changed main canon, but eventually replaced their new 52 counterparts.
Next week, we break the Titan Super pattern with the final tie-in to Convergence, involving characters that an alleged fan has managed to screw up by a writer I'm unfamiliar with. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. For the last of my reviews of Convergence tie-ins, I've saved not necessarily the best for last, but certainly the one that had me the most concerned. Largely because of the characters involved being screwed over by DC in the past, and also me not knowing anything about the writer's previous work. I'm taking issue with Convergence Batgirl, with Stephanie Brown in the title role, with a couple of familiar faces along for the ride. Alongside art by Rick Leonardi, Mark Pennington, and Steve Buccellato, will Alicia Whitney do a worse job than James Tinney IV? I honestly don't think that's possible, but let's see if this story makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads.
Issue number 1's cover sees Batgirl alongside Black Bat and Red Robin, looking outward in front of a domed city while Gorilla Grodd roars over the horizon. Maybe they don't know he's grown to kaiju size and are waiting for him from the other direction. We start in a desert, where Steph stands guard as her allies rest, narrating basically her crime-fighting career, starting out going full throttle, finding out you're not as good as you thought, but dealing with it nevertheless. She wakes Cassandra to take over sentry duty, while she takes a much-needed bathroom break. Red Robin, unmasked like the rest of them, asks where she thinks she's going, and boy howdy does she not care for his implication that she might abandon her city even though she's out of practice and leaves in a huff. Tim tells Cassie he's not mad at Steph, but the situation, wondering why someone that hasn't donned their costume in a year was chosen instead of either of them to defend their city. Cassie thinks that perhaps it's because Steph is less predictable.
You mean she's not going to let her reality's Gotham die because of incompetence and daddy issues? Imagine that! It's like she's a good character. Or at least well written.
As she wonders if Batman ever has trouble when nature calls, Steph is in the process of dropping her pants when... she's attacked by Catman.
Inappropriate timing doesn't begin to cover it. I mean, okay, in a tactical sense, if you're trying to take someone out when they're most vulnerable is an optimal choice, but...
After trying to play it cool, like she had tricked her foe into thinking her defenses were down, she knees him in the crotch, saying her entourage isn't there to help her. Yet that's when Tim shows up, and it's distraction enough for Catman to take advantage with a kick. Double R had a reason for going after Steph, but can't think of why at the moment, and therefore asks if he's just not very bright.
I see two explanations for Tim's demeanor here. One is that Miss Whitney isn't totally aware of how Tim Drake would act in the situation, comparing her to other writers that have tackled him before Flashpoint, or Harper Rowe's writer's pet aura from the Eternal books has a retroactive effect, making him a moron even here.
As Batgirl continues the fight, Catsy explains he'd rather be leading his resistance forces against the telepathic ape, Grodd. He's being chatty as a delaying tactic, and notes that Tim is smiling for some reason. Wondering if Red Robin got spored by a flower and it's affecting his brain, Stephanie's instincts tell her that Black Bat is in trouble, so she masks up and leaves.
I was initially very critical of the fact that it took Tim this long to put his mask on, since he saw Stephanie fighting Catman. She at least got snuck up on. She has an excuse. But given the circumstances they're in, where the guy they're fighting is from a completely different reality that might be going bye-bye soon, I suppose it's not that big of a deal.
The three of them arrive to see Cassie avoiding Grodd's attacks, while Steph begins thinking she was chosen by mistake to be a champion, getting confused by her abductor for Babs or Cass, perhaps. We jump back a year in the early days of Gotham being cut off from the rest of the world. Despite encouragement from Cassandra and Tim, the chaos still got to her. People going nuts, killing themselves, one guy even setting loose zoo animals. And the guy ended up being killed by the very lion he freed, which in turn was shot by a cop. And it was this event that led Stephanie to strip down and walk away in her underwear.
You know, there are a lot of reasons why the dramatic moment of removing your superhero costume for one final time should be relegated to the privacy of one's own home. The elements of the weather, dangerous situations as you trek back, perverts with cameras.
Without having to prove herself as Batgirl, Stephanie embraced being a nurse, seen helping a young woman give birth, something in which she has personal experience.
Pre-Flashpoint, Stephanie got pregnant, which kept her out of the vigilante life for a while. She saw the pregnancy through and gave the child up for adoption, and in retrospect was a pretty inspiring time in her arc. So glad that was sacrificed so she could be Harper Rowe's bootlick and sleep with the guy she knew for 5 minutes.
Thanks, bad writing! As she and the doctor leave for the night, they're confronted by Killer Moth, who, incidentally, was the first villain Barbara Gordon faced as Batgirl. Intentional hint, maybe? Well, he holds them up, only for young Miss Brown to fight back verbally. She understands he's got his own issues, but what he's doing isn't right, and directs the dumbfounded Moth to a Lutheran church where a focus group meets every Friday. Red Robin is seen having watched the incident, and it's not really clear if he's going to subdue Moth or not. Stephanie is relaxing in her apartment, thinking that life without a cape taught her the costume theatrics give the impression of wanting to escalate a conflict.
I suppose that's one way to consider it, though I don't really agree entirely. I mean, would it be that much of a stretch to say the same thing of uniformed police officers?
That's when her roommate, Cassandra Cain, returns home from stopping some criminals from cordoning off a subway system, one of whom punched her in the mammary gland. Seems weird, but I guess it could happen for a female vigilante. Though with Cassie's skills, it's even more of a mystery how it happened at all.
Know who to block that? The real Cassie Cain!
Steph offers a reading lesson, but Cass isn't much in the mood. The news isn't offering anything new on the dome, and Cassandra is hungry for meat, specifically the guinea pig they intended to breed for food. But Stephanie went and got attached, naming it Proserpine, so she naturally objects, even willing to fight the superior warrior over it, remembering full well that Batman has said Black Bat could potentially beat even him.
Some readers have made the criticism that Cassie wouldn't kill a guinea pig for meat, citing her no-killing rule and the many extremes she went to uphold it. While I don't remember her being a staunch vegetarian, I suppose it's possible that she wouldn't want to kill animals either, typically, even in this kind of situation. So you could say she'll eat a hamburger, but she doesn't want to kill the cow herself.
Cassie returns the critter to its cage, and probably exemplifying why some people say never be roommates with your best friends, she reveals the various weaknesses Stephanie's body language revealed, including "don't slaughter me, cow eyes." The news interrupts them, relaying the standard Talos message of "now fight," and how Batgirl was listed as the city's champion, not Black Bat or Robin. Red Robin? Weird, the previous stories didn't show the selections to be so picky. Tim retrieved Stephanie's suit, and Cass has been keeping it in secret, though never thought to wash it. And what better way to train someone who's out of practice for an impending ultimate battle than on a rooftop with your masks off? Steph seems to remember some of her skills, but still has a ways to go. She recalls her early days, how some might outclass her, but she was always a match for Tim. Perhaps in more ways than one? But Cassie calls her back to the present, just as Red Robin arrives, wanting to help, since it's quite likely Steph could lose, given her retirement.
And this is the exact opposite of her recreation in Batman Eternal. This is more like Stephanie as she was when she started out. She didn't have all the skills or the answers. She never fooled herself into thinking otherwise. She puts on a brave front because she wants to help people, to stop the bad guy. She's not secretly helping him or cowing to an unlikable Mary Sue.
People are flooding the streets, trying to leave the city with the dome gone. but the cops are keeping them at bay until it's known what lies beyond Gotham's new borders. The three young vigilantes swing to the police barricade at the bridge, and as tensions rise and Batgirl is briefly unseen, she picks up a megaphone and threatens the crowd with a flash grenade that could blind them for at least 6 hours. It seems to do the trick of calming them down, mostly because they don't think to question why the heroes aren't wearing goggles. That's when a swarm of metallic-looking orbs grab Batgirl, calling her friends by their real names, and Tim does the same. Smart. As he and Cass try to anchor her down, only for all of them to be carried through a portal and dropped into the desert from the beginning, letting Gotham wait and see if they live or die. Funny, those orbs and the whole portal gimmick never showed up in the previous tie-in bouts. The opponents just ended up crossing over from one city to the other. The 2-page synopsis mentions Cassandra for a couple panels, then breezes through Stephanie's life from spoiler to Batgirl. It even mentions Damian Wayne having maybe a crush on her, though no mention that she herself previously held his job as Robin.
Given the scuttlebutt that's gone around about how much one or more heads of DC don't like Stephanie, or Cassie for that matter, I think it's a wonder that any printing of them is this faithful to the characters at all. No.
The cover for issue 2 sees Batgirl running up to Grodd, who restrains Blackbat in a really awkward pose. Is he trying to break her back with his stomach? Is she freeing herself by going limp like a toddler that doesn't want to go to bed? Anyway, we pick up with Grodd fighting Cassie as her friends and Catman arrive. We flash back to the previous day as the trio landed in the desert, 2/3 of them unexpectedly. Whether or not it's the same desert they saw before their abduction, Steph sees it as an arena for a game of the highest stakes, but their opponent is a no-show. However, as Red Robin notes, their captor wants a fight, so winning by default is out. Cassie calls for quiet, since as we see Catman watching from distance, anyone could hear them. Too bad they didn't think of that when they were shouting their real names in front of hundreds of citizens. But the possibilities begin weighing on Batgirl before Red R snaps her out of it, suggesting she consider it like an old-fashioned, middle-aged challenge of knights, all straightforward and such. Though Stephanie notes that plans don't always work out. For example, what if, like them, the other challenger had people tagging along as well? And sure enough, that's what happened as we snap back to the present.
Score one more for improvised thinking. Can a crossover between Batgirl's crew and the cast of Whose Line Is It Anyway be far behind?
Catman explains that in his reality, he'd gone to Gotham to stock up on weapons to fight Grodd. Incidentally, the girl was tracking him when they were trapped by the dome. On the plus side, Grodd's telepathy, super strength, and speech were nullified, so he was put in a zoo with an elderly female.
That's a little odd. Taking away superpowers is one thing, but I was under the impression that Grodd, like other denizens of Gorilla City, simply evolved differently, so the dome shouldn't affect his speech. But talking or no talking, he'd still be as intelligent, I'd wager.
After the dome fell, they were squaring off, with Catman ready to take them both out with an explosion if necessary. That's when the Silver Globes took them, instigating Seaman's bomb and knocking them both out until he woke in the desert to the Bat-Kids talking. Before Batgirl can answer if she'll help kill the ape, she sees Grodd about to rip Blackbat in two.
The other half of the rent!
Instead of a brave or condescending remark, or a bravado-filled quip, Batgirl offers herself in Blackbat's stead. Unfortunately, Grodd doesn't care and slams the girl into the ground. Red Robin attacks as Catman throws a knife in the primate's chest, but the former is smacked aside. B-Girl charges only to be grabbed by the hairy powerhouse, and thinking she's going to die, her thoughts trail back to the previous day. Red Robin pulling her from some falling rocks loosened by an earthquake, only for Cass to sort of kill the mood. As they look for a good resting spot, Red Robin wants to talk, but is reminded that Steph's attempts to talk to him in the past were rebuffed. She's upset that he didn't even find the words to officially break up with her, assuming it was because she quit the costumed life, just remaining silent. Tim says he didn't know what to say, but always cared about her, and maybe the job was possibly part of what formed their relationship. He's considering that being Batgirl again was thrust upon her. But hey, if she wants to get back together again, he's up for it. Steph tells him to figure it out on his own if he said something wrong or not after she decks him.
I deserve that.
For as intelligent as Tim was, he wasn't above a stupid mistake. This is really more of a matter of choosing his words poorly. Did it deserve a right cross to the jaw? Gray area.
Back in the present, Steph doesn't want that to be her last memory of her and Tim, so she gives Grodd's face a taste of what it's like to get waxed while Catman slashes at the gorilla's back. Grodd psychically takes control of Red Rob, but he's quickly knocked out. Since it looks like they're losing, Steph suggests either she or Catman give up. That way the portals will take them to their respective homes and put an end to Grodd's threat. Since everyone he cared about is dead, Catsy agrees to take a losing strike, though I'm not sure why he had to take his mask off to do it. After quoting the band Queen, and Charlie Sheen to a lesser extent, they're carried off by the orbs, while Catman questions Grodd's, gorillahood. Wherever they've gone, our trio are dropped in an empty Gotham street.
Catman's dialogue is kind of confusing. I can't tell if the entire city he came from was deserted because Grodd killed them all, or Grodd only killed the people Catman cared about, and there were survivors when the two were taken that may or may not live now. And I guess it's questionable what kind of light this shines on Stephanie, given that city may or may not be doomed, and she was willing to sacrifice herself and thus her Gotham for it. Extreme circumstances?
Sometime later, Cass is lying in a hospital bed, her condition unchanged since they returned, and Tim offers the gift of honest-to-goodness coffee he picked up on the black market. The warrior girl awakens to her friends and pet guinea pig.
Oh, that reminds me. Cassie redodged that too, you flagrant fanfiction facsimile!
The two of them explaining in turn the events of the fight is too much for Cassandra, and she literally tells them to get a room. They leave, and Tim decides to go for the gusto and kisses Steph. Later, in a candlelit room, they begin to get intimate, possibly because of the end of the world and all, but their injuries linger, so they just hold each other. And if everything ended at that moment, that would have been fine for Stephanie Brown.
And that was Convergence Batgirl. The art is fine, but story-wise, I remember not liking it that much when I first read it. Though after a second go-through, it was much more enjoyable.
That said, it does suffer from a few details. It is great to see these characters without the deplorable reinventions latched onto them like leeches, and they feel mostly like they did before Flashpoint, with some exceptions. Tim's a little more clueless, but I think that was for B-Girl's revelation that she still loved him regardless. Yet that doesn't explain him smirking how cute she was in the fight with Catman, let alone acting so casual around the villain. I can understand the argument that Cassie wouldn't kill an animal for food, even if I'm not entirely on board, and I can see her getting an apartment with Steph since their one-time rivalry developed into a good friendship. Overall, I think the pacing did suffer from the non-linear fashion in which the story was told.
Steph had a few discrepancies herself, mentioning real names while in costume out in public and walking around without her mask, which seems kind of bush league for a crime fighter, and even though she did quit for a year, she spent several years being a crime fighter before then, so you'd think that would stick. Some of that, however, could be attributed to their unique situation, maybe making the cloak and dagger stuff feel a little less necessary.
Though I do question if Stephanie would have quit at all. There are times before she became Batgirl where she stepped away from the vigilante life. Getting pregnant, her mom finding out she was Spoiler, being fired from being Robin, or when her death was retconned as a ruse. And when that happened, it was explained that she returned to Gotham and crime fighting because she wanted to. She had the drive to help people who could not help themselves. I guess you could say that the extreme circumstance and the garish way of some people responding to the dome made her question what she was doing. Sure, telling off Killer Moth worked, but she'd have to know that not every villain would respond to her with bemusement. If that had been a certain clown with an acid-spraying flower or an explosive boxing glove gun, I would hope she'd have responded with a lot more punching, regardless of her newfound philosophy of thinking costumes make situations worse.
And it was odd enough that in so many stories that were located in one version of Gotham or another, none of them besides Flashpoint had a Batman. Weirder still is that we saw no trace of Joker, Penguin, Poison Ivy, or any number of other rogues that would relish the idea of a captive city.
For all the story's faults, these two comics managed to do these characters more justice than anything of post-Flashpoint's main canon. I know I criticized Tinian for throwing Tim and Spoiler Alert in bed together when he started on Detective, but in that context, their new 52 origins were still in play regardless of vague hints of something from pre-Flashpoint, so they hardly knew each other. Here, their context is one of a long-standing on-again, off-again relationship that's actually been developed. And even then, when it came down to it, it was enough for Stephanie just to be with someone she loved, not to indulge in some poorly constructed fanfiction-style CW moment done for cheap titillation or the hollow dramatics of Tim's fake death.
And that does it for our look at the Convergence tie-ins. DC is lucky I bothered with it all. I did find it a little odd that the only cities of focus were really relegated to being Gotham or Metropolis, and there was some confusion in the stories themselves that may have been cleared up had I read the miniseries proper. But I doubt it. Next week, we leave the big two of comics behind to focus on two of the biggest properties of the 1980s colliding. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.